Hello anime fan, welcome back to What If Animes 2.0. So in this video you gonna see, what if Naruto was ordered to marry multiple girls to revive his clan? This is part 1. And if you want more, then hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe. So let's get in the video and do check out the author of the story. What do you mean Tsunade Ba-chan? Naruto asked as he rubbed the back of his head. He was now at the rank of Junin, and he was now 18 years of age. And as fate would have it, he was the spitting image of the Yondaime Hokage, Arashi Uzumaki. Don't call me that, Naruto. Tsunade angrily retorted and flicked Naruto in the forehead, sending him back far enough that it made the point to stop calling her that. As I was saying, the Uzumaki clan is nearly extinct. You are the last. You will need to find yourself a girl or a few to ensure that the line continues. Now I know what you're going to say. There is an old law that states that if a clan is about to die out, polygamy will be considered legal. Tsunade spoke with a sly smirk on her face, waiting for Naruto to overreact as usual. Naruto's eyes were wide with shock, his right eye twitched as his jaw hung open. But, how, he stammered in a rare moment of Naruto being speechless. Now I will be nice and set you up on a date with my apprentice Shizune. Or would you rather be on a date with Sakura? Brat? I know I'll arrange for you to have a date with both of them on different nights. Be gentleman to them or I will send you flying like I do that pervert you train under. Tsunade cracked her knuckles to drive the point, and smiled in a grandmotherly way when she saw him nod. Fortunately for Naruto, neither of said apprentices were there. He sighed softly, wondering how he got into this kind of mess. He never knew his clan was that important, seeing as the village treated him like filth. He scratched his cheek subconsciously. He wasn't sure how he was gonna survive this. No sane man would want to have that many women in their life. You may leave now, Naruto. For now your mission is to find some girls to help ensure the continuance of your clan. Was all Tsunade said as she waved Naruto off. Once outside Tsunade's office, Naruto once again rubbed his head. He was still trying to wrap his head around what just happened. Just as he was about to come to a conclusion, the worst person for this situation came up, patted him on the back. It was none other than Jiraiya. And he was smiling that lecherous smile of his. Ha 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 ha. Naruto, my boy, you get to live out every man's fantasy. Take this opportunity and marry all the pretty girls you can. Of course, be sure to take a test drive first. He then gave his famous thumbs up, smiling broadly. Only you would think that you Ero Sennin. Naruto said with a somewhat childish attitude for a moment as he crossed his arms over his chest, glaring at Jiraiya. Honestly, how perverted could the old man be, in public nonetheless? Oh come on, Naruto. Who's gonna be first? Don't tell me that pink-haired girl you've been crazy about for years. Or is it the Hyuga heiress? Ooh, I know. It's going to be that Yamanaka girl. I know you and her have been spending some time together. Jiraiya continued to harass his student while getting lecherous thoughts in his head. Just as Jiraiya looked for Naruto, he noticed that something was missing. Naruto. Jiraiya could only smirk while thinking numerous lecherous thoughts. Naruto walked through Konoha muttering about a lecherous Ero Sennin. He had enough to worry about as it is. Just as if by good favor there was something to distract him and get him to focus on the present. Naruto-kun. There you are, came a boisterous feminine voice as he was suddenly glommed. He looked back to see it was Ino. She was the only girl he knew of with the guts to glomp a ninja. Why were you taking so long to come visit me, Naruto-kun? She said, acting like the spoiled princess she is, going into a fake pout. Ba-chan was telling me something about how I have to restore my clan. So she says I have to marry numerous women and make sure my clan is revived. Naruto said, oblivious to who he was talking to. Ino just smiled darkly and tightened her arms around his neck. Is that so? Was her response, her eye twitching in anger. There was no way she would be fond of sharing Naruto. It took her long enough to get him to start dating her in the first place, but then again, if she was somehow the favorite, it would be okay too. Can't breath, Ino-chan? Naruto called out, short on breath from how tight Ino had her arms around his neck. Ino realized she was pretty much strangling Naruto. She loosened her arms and smiled in embarrassment. So where are you taking me to dinner this time? And no Ichiraku, you eat enough of that stuff as it is. Ino chimed whilst nagging him. Much to the dismay of Naruto and his wallet, he ended up going to a fancy restaurant with Ino since for obvious reasons he couldn't say no to her. It was fortunate for Naruto too that people stopped seeing the Kyuubi when they saw him. They now saw him as the son of the Yondaime Hokage, and as someone who would one day become Hokage. It made Naruto's life easier, even if he and Ino kept their relationship secret, it just made it easier for them. Especially since Naruto didn't want Sakura and Ino to start arguing like they were prone to. But for the moment Naruto felt like his mission wasn't too important. He had the company of a lovely lady. Even if she was as mouthy as he was, oh that's right, he was having dinner with her, and he was thinking about how his life had changed. Nay. Naruto, are you listening to me? Ino bellowed out as she hit Naruto over the head. No problem at all. Naruto just gave her his genuine smile, and that seemed to keep her from yelling at him anymore. Of course it just means that his life was going to be getting more interesting from this point on. Of course I am. You were saying something about how you want me to get my own house, instead of living with Haku-chan and Zabuza-san. He in all truth had been guessing, after all Ino had been on his case about it for a while now. That's right, was all she said, while shooting Naruto the very look all men fear. Her dad warned me about that look. Naruto thought as he smiled nervously in fear. He ran his hand through his unruly spiky hair, afraid Ino would hurt him. Now are you absolutely sure? You can't just marry me? She had a very scary look in her eyes. Yes, Ba-chan's orders. Honest. But, even though I'm not keen on this, I will love you each equally, but you will receive a bit more love than the others. He held his hands up, afraid of being hit, mostly a natural reflex from his former teammate Sakura hitting him so often. Hopefully this would work to appease the ever-bossy girlfriend. Good, so when are you going to ask me to marry you? Ino smiled, pleased that she made her point that she should get special attention. Naruto on the other hand sighed in relief. He just had to make sure Ino got to be his first wife, if he knew what was good for him. The news didn't take long to circulate amongst the kunoichi who knew Naruto well, and needless to say it was enough to pique their interests. And they were trying to force their way into the Hokage's office to see if it was in fact true. Many of them thought that Naruto was completely off the market, since they could see all the signs considering he was often spending time with Ino. Enough. As if Tsunade, the Godem Hokage, shouting wasn't enough, she slammed her fist on her desk, almost shoving it through the floor. This was more than enough to get the women to calm down. Yes, it is true. Naruto is being required to rebuild his clan, but that doesn't mean you swarm him like love-starved fangirls. Naruto is like the wind, you can't force him do anything. And you will not intimidate him via a certain case cage. At this a certain Suna Kunoichi muttered. Outside the office Jiraiya was eavesdropping and rubbing his hands together, getting many ideas for his next novel. This was going to result in great novel more than likely. Oh yes, very great. A few hours had passed, and Naruto had escorted Ino home. If it's one thing he learned from his makeshift family over the years is to be a gentleman. Tsunade after drilled it into his head since she knew Jiraiya would be the worst influence. They stood in front of Ino's home. Ino was practically glowing with happiness. It was a known fact she liked a guy she could control. Thank you for dinner, Naruto-kun. She smiled happily as she wrapped her arms around his neck. I should give you a reward. Just as Ino was about to kiss Naruto, just as their lips were about to touch, the door of her house swung open, and Inoichi rushed out. Aha! I caught you two red-handed. I knew you were dating. Inoichi shouted in a very protective manner as he pointed at Ino and Naruto. Ino's face was simply red, with a mixture of anger and embarrassment. She couldn't believe her father and his overprotectiveness. Naruto simple sighed softly when he saw Ino's eye twitch just before a vein popped out of her forehead. Ooh, Dad, you are such a moment killer. And we know you know because we saw you following us. Naruto could only pray for a miracle in this situation, watching his girlfriend argue with her father. Excuse me, he hoped he could get a word in edgewise this time. It never worked when Ino argued with Sakura. And in unison Ino and Inoichi bellowed angrily, which caused Naruto to shrink back a little. What is it? Naruto only sighed and took a breath. He then decided on a distraction tactic. He pointed to the roof of Ino's house and shouted loudly, "Ero Sennin," and when the two looked to see, he grabbed Ino and led her off before Inoichi knew what happened. Wait a sec. I don't see Jiraiya-sama. Inoichi turned only to notice Naruto and Ino were missing. His eye twitched as he only had a deadpan expression on his face. Naruto. You better bring my daughter back this instant. Inoichi shook his fist, being ever the protective parent. Of course, nearby a famous copy ninja looked up from his book for a moment, smiling under his mask, recognizing that as the sound of Naruto up to something. "Naruto-kun, why did you drag me off like that?" Before Ino could complain anymore, she found herself being kissed by Naruto. She could only blush for the moment, not really expecting that to happen. Fortunately for Naruto, it shut her up for a moment. He then slipped a ring onto one of her fingers and gave her his famous grin. "Not exactly the way I wanted to do this, but will you marry me?" Naruto half expected her to say something over the top and act hyperactive. It surprised him to see her looking tear-eyed as she wrapped her arms around him, hugging him tightly. "Of course I will. Why wouldn't I? Someone needs to be at your side given what Hokage-sama wants of you," Ino said with her special cocky smirk. Her confidence is what Naruto loved about her, that and the fact she never hit him over the head for small stuff. "Now let's go inform my dad of the news before he gets any angrier." Ino then pulled Naruto off to her house. Once back at the front of Ino's house, Ino was smiling brightly. "Guess what, Dad?" Ino began. 5 minutes later, it could be sworn that everyone in the village heard Inoichi yell in shock as he shouted one word only. "What?" Naruto just stared blankly as he looked at his future father-in-law, was petrified with shock. Ino muttered and rubbed her temples in disbelief of her father's reaction. "You would think he never expected me to get engaged." Ino sighed and shot the look at Naruto, causing him to petrify immediately. Temari paced around the room she was staying in, her fists clenched tight. She had to formulate the best way to gain Naruto's affection without involving Gaara, who was in fact Naruto's best friend. She didn't have to involve Gaara, she just needed a good way to get Naruto alone. Now it was no secret she had given up on Shikamaru long ago when she learned he was both a coward and a lazy ass. Coward because he was deathly afraid of Gaara, and everyone knew he just wanted to lie around staring at clouds. Naruto Uzumaki, the last eligible bachelor of Konohagakure. "I will find a way to get you to fall for me. Now I just need an idea." She walked to the window and looked out and saw her salvation, Ichiraku ramen. A sly smirk tugged at the corners of the Desert Rose's mouth. That was the answer. She had seen how Naruto inhaled the stuff. They did say the easiest way to a man's heart is through the stomach. "Naruto Uzumaki, your affection shall be mine, once I buy you lunch." Elsewhere, a certain weapons mistress was contemplating her best method for gaining the affection of Naruto. She had known him for a great while. She knew he was an orphan just like her. She also knew she was more fortunate than him. She remembered when the orphanage threw him out like he was some kind of animal. All because of something you couldn't control, Naruto-kun. She had found that she was growing fonder of Naruto over the years since he consoled her when Neji flat out rejected her. She also realized that she had fallen in love with Naruto, but before she could tell him, the chance was gone. She wouldn't interfere with Naruto's happiness, but now was her chance. But this would require a good idea of how to impress Naruto. "I must show Naruto how much I care for him." She had a fierce look of determination in her eyes as she uttered that sentence. And she began to formulate her plans for the next day in showing Naruto that she cares. The springtime of youth. "Tenten, we will help you achieve this wish." Tenten turned slower, her eye twitching as she saw her former sensei and former teammate posing in her living room. "How long have you two been here?" A vein was popping out of her forehead in embarrassment that members of her former team had overheard her. This was going to complicate things for her if they wanted to help her, since neither of them was in the least cunning. "I and my adorable student shall help you become the bride of Naruto." Guy gave her a thumbs up, and his teeth sparkled as he went into his good guy pose. This was followed by Lee, who copied the same actions. Tenten could only give them a deadpan expression. This was rather embarrassing to watch. "Right," was all she could say as her right eye twitched. It was some time after the village heard Inoichi's scream that Naruto finally got home. He walked through the door and saw the stern look of Zabuza fall upon him. He gulped slowly. He knew he was in for a lecture. Haku was nowhere to be seen. She was probably out at the moment. "Boy, sit down. It's time you and I have a little talk." Zabuza motioned for Naruto to sit at the table. Naruto sat down quietly and remembered back when he faced Zabuza and Haku. Back when they were Kirigakure missing Nen. Flashback. Naruto's growled angrily as he charged at Haku, prepared to kill who he thought was a guy. As the mask fell off, Naruto slowed when he saw the face. Naruto couldn't go through with it. He quickly clenched his fist to knock Haku out. In all honesty, Naruto was still too kind for the world of the shinobi. "I won't kill you, you were deliberately missing." He caught Haku as she fell forward unconscious. In that moment Naruto felt something that confirmed that Haku was in fact a girl. Of course, across the bridge, the fight between the copy ninja and the demon of the mist raged on. Kakashi moved through a flurry of hand seals and ran forward, unleashing Reikiri. Zabuza quickly swung his sword forward. This bought him a moment's reprieve as Reikiri only destroyed the sword. A few shards of the blade flew into Zabuza's body, wounding him. This was enough to ensure he wouldn't be attacking anymore. Just then Naruto collapsed from using up too much chakra. The next thing he knew, he was waking up in a room, looking around quietly. He sat up quickly and pointed in shock when he saw Zabuza and Haku. What are they doing here? Aren't they our enemies? He was worried something bad was going to happen to him. Relax, Naruto. They're on our side, and they will be coming with us to Konohagakure. Kakashi's cool, collected voice rang out as he leaned in the doorway. He knew it would take a few minutes to register with Naruto. Naruto stared blankly for a moment. It slowly registered that the two were on their side and coming back with them to Konohagakure. It wasn't until sometime on their trip back that someone asked why Haku was wearing a dress. That's because Zabuza began, only to be interrupted by Haku. Because I'm a girl, Haku finished the sentence for her sensei. Of course, this caused some jealousy to emanate from Sakura because of the fact Haku was much prettier. Of course, it didn't help to hear it come from Naruto. Good to know, Haku-chan. Because you're prettier than Sakura is. Naruto smiled his foxy grin when he said this, but soon had a fist hit him on the top of the head. At the Hokage's office after their trip had ended, they had explained everything, including Zabuza and Haku's wish to join the Leaf. I will allow this on one condition, Zabuza Momoichi. Sarutobi spoke softly as he stroked his beard, waiting for a response. And that would be? Zabuza responded calmly. He expected it to be some suicidal mission. You must become Naruto's legal guardian. Zabuza, the infamous demon of the mist, was shocked to hear this. Sarutobi then continued as he took a drag on his pipe. Naruto needs a more structured life. He's lived alone all his life. Now what I am about to tell you does not leave this room. It is an S-ranked village secret. Zabuza nodded to the condition. He may not have been the most caring man, but he did his part for Haku. He could only imagine if this kid had a bloodline limit that caused him to be shunned as well. 12 years ago this village was attacked by the Kyuubi no Kitsune, and my successor, the Yondaime Hokage, Arashi Uzumaki, made the one sacrifice he could for the sake of our village. He sealed the Kyuubi inside his newborn son. He had hoped that Naruto would be regarded as a hero, but the villagers only saw a demon. As you can imagine, he has had a hard life. The council overruled my wish to tell Naruto who his father is, so Naruto has no idea who his father is. Zabuza took a moment to absorb all the information, and looked at Sarutobi calmly. I will be his guardian. I'm the demon of the mist. Yet he is only called a demon because he has one sealed inside himself. I can see he will be a great ninja, but he needs to learn to control his emotions more. Sarutobi smiled. He was glad to hear this. It would help make Naruto the hero Arashi wanted him to be. End flashback. For 7 years I have been your legal guardian, but now you're old enough to take care of yourself. But still, you are still a moron at times. What I want to talk to you about is Haku. Zabuza began. Even after all these years he still wore the mask over his face. What about her, Zabuza-san? Zabuza took a deep breath and sighed. He had grown to consider Haku like a daughter, and what he was about to say was really hard. I know about what the Hokage wishes of you, and I have seen how you and Haku have grown close over the years. And I had intimidated you into not starting a relationship with her. But if you break her heart, I will destroy you. At this, Naruto gulped. He had both respect and fear for Zabuza, and he would never intentionally hurt Haku. He just quickly nodded his head. He didn't want to make Zabuza angrier. I can tell Haku loves you very much, Naruto. So, you better consider her as one of your other wives because she deserves happiness too. Naruto's eye twitched. This was getting really weird. When did I become Sasuke? He calmly thought to himself as he scratched his cheek for a moment. Don't worry, Zabuza-san. I will be sure to consider Haku-chan. At hearing this, Zabuza nodded. Okay, you can go to bed now. Remember, you hurt Haku and I will break you. Zabuza quickly looked at Naruto with killing intent to back up the threat. Naruto woke up the next morning. This of course was powering up form of Naruto. No matter how energetic he was, when he woke up he was a bit on the grumpy side. He brushed his teeth, and when he finished he found a letter attached to a kunai. It's too early for death threats, he thought to himself as he read the note attached to it. He read the note quietly. He was hoping things would calm down soon. Dear Naruto. Meet me at Ichiraku Ramen for lunch. If you don't show up I will track you down and bring you there myself. Love, the desert flower. Even I can figure this out. It's from Tamari. He rubbed his temples lightly. It was safe to say today would be another interesting day. After he finished brushing his teeth he walked back to the breakfast table and yawned for a moment. He then saw a bowl of ramen in front of him, piping hot hand, then looked up and saw Haku smiling politely at him. Haku, unlike Ino, allowed him to eat ramen constantly. Not that it would kill him to eat something else, he just thought it would. This should perk you up. Naruto just muttered a thanks and began to eat quietly. He was pondering how he would survive this mission. He was certain that this enemy was beyond his means to defeat. Hell hath no fury like love-crazed kunoichi. Why, oh why did I have to become the target of every love-starved kunoichi? Naruto thought to himself as he ate. He also knew there was one girl in the village that wasn't a ninja but was in love with him. Sadly, he would have to see her while he was at lunch with Tamari. His face paled when he realized Haku was staring at him dreamily. Oh, that's right, Ba-chan said, I have to revive my clan. He continued his train of thoughts as he ate his meal. Meanwhile, inside Naruto's mindscape, you know Kit, it won't be all that bad. You revive your clan, and you get to live everyman's dream. The Kyuubi said from behind the bars of its prison as Naruto stood in front of it. Naruto probably chose, have you been talking to the Arrow Sennin, you stupid furball? Naruto replied, not looking too pleased that Kyuubi was also finding enjoyment in this. What's the worst that can happen? Your loudmouth fiancé and the girl with the giant forehead start arguing. It's actually entertaining if you think about it. Naruto could have sworn he saw the Kyuubi smirk, at least he thought the Kyuubi was smirking. It was really hard to tell if it was. I'm not too keen on being punched by an insanely strong medic nin. Not like it will kill you, Kit. Naruto glared and grumbled as usual. Why was it that most of the people he knew seemed to find enjoyment in this? You're enjoying this, aren't you? Naruto raised his eyebrow at the Kyuubi's enjoyment of his plight. Of course I am, Kit. You are suffering but you won't be killed by it. The Kyuubi once again looked as if it were smiling. Naruto just grumbled about the damn Kyuubi being a thorn in his side yet again. Back in reality, only a matter of seconds had passed. He then gave her his trademark foxy grin after finishing the ramen. He smiled happily as he was now awake from his favorite meal of the day. Now what do with his day until lunch? I could train, but then again I would lose track of time and make Tamari angry. He needed to find something to keep himself occupied for most of the morning. Maybe find a bigger house to live in. Haku-chan, I'm going to go out for a while today. Probably talk to Ba-chan and see if she can help me find a place. I really should get a bigger house, he calmly said as he walked to his room. Once Naruto was in his room, Haku looked disappointed at the thought of Naruto moving away from her. She never thought the day would come when he would go his own way. In fact, Haku had grown attached to Naruto. She would have to make her move before her window of opportunity was gone. She didn't even have a chance as an orange and green blur rushed past her and out the door. Naruto, I will track you down later. I'm still an oinen. I will track you down and have my chance before it's too late. Naruto stealthily entered Hokage Tower. He needed to speak to Tsunade without running into Sakura or Shizune. Just as he was about to make it into Tsunade's office, he felt some eyes on him. He slowly turned to see Shizune looking sternly at him. He forced a smile, afraid she would attack him like Sakura would. Shizune, age 25. The strengths and weaknesses of her being a possible bride in Naruto's book were simple. She was nauseatingly way too cute. Naruto, were you going to just barge into Tsunade-sama's office without permission? She crossed her arms over her chest as she walked over to Naruto slowly. Hey, I just needed to ask Ba-chan if she knows of a bigger house I could move into. He raised his hands up, obviously afraid of Shizune. The cute ones were always the most deadly. Now Naruto-kun, why are you so afraid of me? Is it because you're now the most sought-after ninja in Konohagakure, after you seem to have really grown into your body? A sly smirk crossed her face as she approached Naruto. And as if by some miracle of luck the doors to Tsunade's office opened. "Get in here, brat." Tsunade yelled as she pulled Naruto into her office, closing the doors quickly. He sighed in relief. He didn't need to have a girl coming on to him this early in the morning. "Thank you, Tsunade-sama." Naruto decided to avoid making Tsunade angry at him. It never ended well when he did. She raised an eyebrow at his sudden politeness. This was very unlike Naruto. "Who are you? And what have you done with Naruto?" She cracked her knuckles and prepared to flick his forehead. Politeness didn't fit the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki. It was peculiar and very unnatural. It was as unnatural as the time they slipped Shikamaru some caffeine pills and he was more hyper than Naruto. "What do you want, Naruto?" Tsunade was quick to figure out that Naruto probably came to get a favor. And she had a good idea what it was. It was going to be one of those days where everything makes as much sense as the strange world that Jiraiya lived in. "Well, you see, Tsunade-ba-chan, I need to see about getting a bigger house, since I have to marry so many women, and the space would be good, especially for my health, at least my mental health that is. Where I live is too small, and I doubt Ino likes me living with a girl prettier than her." Naruto kept his guard up in case Tsunade flicked his forehead. Tsunade smiled and walked to her desk, pulling out a folder. She set out on the table open. It detailed the Uzumaki compound, which no one lived in anymore. "This is where you will be living. It belonged to your father, the Yondaime, but the council didn't want you, as they so kindly put it, tainting it, so they wouldn't let you live there. Needless to say, they are all gone. Funny how old age catches up to them." Tsunade smiled. She then threw a kunai into the wall, causing Jiraiya to reveal himself. "Make yourself useful, you lech, and take Naruto there." It was rather shameful in her book that Jiraiya was watching the happenings in the village like some sick, twisted man. Wait, that's typical of Jiraiya, except he's usually outside a bathhouse. "Yes, Tsunade." "Sheesh. You sure know how to give a man a heart attack." When Tsunade and Naruto just gave him the deadpan expression, he sighed. "Right, let's go, brat." "Okay, here it is, brat." Jiraiya simply smirked as Naruto's jaw hung agape. The size was incredible. It made the Hyuga compound look like his first apartment. He had no idea his family was that powerful. Then again, his father was called the Yellow Flash. "This should be big enough. I'll have to show Ino, but I won't move in until next week, I think." Naruto smiled as he rubbed the back of his head. It was going to be an adjustment. He then realized that he had to be at Ichiraku Ramen soon. He swallowed hard as he thought of what Tamari might do if he was late. Crap. "I gotta go. Tamari will kill me." Naruto pulled on his hair as he rushed off towards Ichiraku, leaving a smirking Jiraiya at the compound. This should be worth at least one whole chapter. Jiraiya then disappeared in a blur, heading in the same direction to watch Naruto on a date with Sanagakure's most beautiful Kunoichi. Naruto panted as he reached the ramen stand with only 5 minutes to spare. He hoped he was on time because Tamari wasn't someone that made idle threats. He caught his breath just in time as Tamari walked alongside of him and latched onto his arm. Now it wasn't a shock to anyone that Tamari had it going on. But still, Naruto had to blush, and frankly it wasn't like he could turn her down. Tamari was known to get what she wants. "Hello, Naruto-kun. I see you got my message, good. Otherwise I would have had Gaara convince you to go out with me." It was somewhat disturbing to the spiky-haired blonde at how sweetly Tamari made it sound. "Order whatever you want, Naruto-kun. It's my treat. Are you sure, Tamari-chan? I mean, I can eat a lot." He then pointed to the stand, which displayed a portrait of him that said, "Number 1 customer," below it. Tamari nodded softly and pulled Naruto to the stand and gave him a look that said, "Sit." He complied, not wanting her to hit him over the head with her fan. He didn't need a headache today, but he knew he might end up with one. "Welcome, Naruto-kun." Ayame greeted them cheerfully, though she blushed slightly. This of course caused Tamari to wonder why Naruto ate ramen so often. Was it because he enjoyed the company of this girl? "Hello, Ayame-chan. Hello, Tuchi-san." Naruto chimed. He had gone a whole day without Ichiraku ramen. He felt like he was going cold turkey. "Will you have, Naruto? Your usual 2 of everything?" Tuchi knew Naruto loved ramen, but frankly he had no idea where he put it all. Tuchi then noticed his daughter was looking at Naruto like a love-struck schoolgirl. He could only smile at this. "No. I think I will eat light today." Naruto smiled brightly, then looked over at Tamari. He then began to subconsciously go over what not to do when out on a date. especially when it's Gaara's sister. So, I'll just have 4 bowls of miso pork ramen. He just kept his usual grin. He calls that eating light? I wonder what he calls a large meal. Temari raised her eyebrow delicately at Naruto's odd idea of a light meal. I'll just have 1 bowl of miso shrimp ramen. When the food was set before them, Naruto smiled. He had always loved ramen since he was a child. He smiled and picked up his chopsticks and smiled happily. Itadakimatsu. He called out loudly as he broke the chopsticks apart and began to eat. Temari had followed suit. She was amazed to see Naruto eating with manners. When he eats like a civilized person, he's even more attractive. Temari thought to herself as a sly smile crossed her face. You know, Naruto, I never really thanked you for helping Gaara come to his senses. Temari smiled sweetly as she looked at Naruto. I didn't do that much. Naruto just scratched his cheek quietly. He had become less cocky over the years. It didn't hurt that Zabuza knocked him down a peg quite often. But he had to wonder, was his life going to be a living hell later on from all these strong women who were interested in him? Naruto is with Temari too. He hasn't even been engaged to Ino for 24 hours yet. How troublesome, Shikamaru said as he walked by with his son. Shikotaro. Then again, it's what she always wanted. I was never energetic enough, and I was too afraid of her brother. Shikamaru was off in his own thoughts again. Man, what a drag. I would hate to see the children they have. And like that, he was on his way. That is before Temari hurt him for that comment about horrible children. Once they were done, and Temari had paid for the meal, realizing that he ate light out of consideration for her. This must be the reason why all the girls were crazy about Naruto. She of course knew that Naruto still had a demon sealed inside of him, so he had a higher metabolism rate. Temari noticed Naruto was starting to slink away and quickly grabbed his arm in a vice-like grip. Not so fast, Naruto Uzumaki. Our date isn't over just yet. She then dragged Naruto off. Needless to say, Naruto had a look of dismay on his face. And don't think of using that, but Gaara will kill me, excuse. With that, she dragged him off. Off to the side, a certain novelist was writing what had transpired down. Good, good. My next novel, Icha Icha Engagements, shall be a bestseller. He smiled broadly and jumped off, keeping a safe distance. Yes, it was true, the Arrow Senin had decided to go in a new direction. Romance novels. He had heard women like that sort of thing. Hours later, Naruto found himself sitting with Temari on top of the Hokage monument. Though at first he was reluctant, he was enjoying this. He saw Temari wasn't so horrible, just a tad bossy. Then again, most of the women he knew were bossy. You know, Naruto-kun, I'm not as vicious as Shikamaru made me out to be. It's just mostly just living with a brother who was a bit crazy. She smiled softly as she rested her head on his shoulder. And I don't mean Kankuro. I knew you meant Gaara. Does he at least get some sleep? I think he needed a nap. Naruto smiled softly before Temari jabbed him in the ribs. I'm kidding. You're a bad comedian. You better stick to being a ninja, she said with a deadpan look on her face. Perfect, just have to wait till he's in love with me. Once again, the beauty of Suna smirked. You will have to take me out again, Naruto-kun. By the way, Gaara is coming to the village soon. Temari smirked as all the blood left Naruto's face. It was an expected reaction. It's getting pretty late. Temari began as she looked at Naruto. She looked him dead in the eyes, her green, they looked green, eyes locking with his lapis lazuli-like eyes. She then leaned forward and kissed him softly on the lips. The knuckle-headed blonde didn't fight back any either. His face turned the most interesting shade of red though. Humana? Gaara is going to kill me. He then got jabbed in the ribs again, and just chuckled. He isn't going to kill you, now escort me home, future Rokudame Hokage. She smirked as Naruto nodded. Naruto first stood to his feet and then helped her up, smiling the way he normally does. Much better, I prefer that grin on your face, foxboy. And with that they walked off, heading to where Temari was staying. After dropping Temari off at the apartment she was staying in, he walked home. He caught a glimpse of Rock Lee and Guy Sensei acting like they always do. Like they were on an acid trip, or needed to down the dosage on their psychiatric medications. Either way, it was very unusual, yet normal behavior for them. Naruto walked through the door of his home. He had one hope, that his day wasn't going to get any crazier. Sadly, no dice. He walked in to see Hiyashi and Hinata Hyuga in his living room. What kind of insanity is going on here? Naruto, I've been meaning to speak with you. Hiyoshi's cold voice rang out, and like most Hyuga he acted like he had the scroll of forbidden jutsu shoved up his rear. Naruto mumbled and sat down across from the Hyugas. This was just going to be fun. Yes, what is it? Naruto said with an exhausted tone to his voice. He glanced at Hinata and noticed she was blushing as usual. She had become quite the catch over the years, and amazingly she was still single. I have a proposition that will benefit your clan, before the birth of you, or Hinata even. I and your father, Arashi, made an arrangement, and that was for his firstborn son to wed my firstborn daughter. It should also serve to make the Uzumaki clan stronger, so in 2 weeks you shall wed Hinata. It was impossible to see if this was joke or if he was really serious. IGG get to marry Naruto-kun? The Hyuga heiress managed to stutter out before blushing bright red and fainting onto the floor. Hiyoshi's eye twitched. This was quite embarrassing. She still does that, huh? Naruto asked as he looked at an unconscious yet smiling happily Hinata. I'm afraid so, I hope she gets over it. We don't need to have that happen at the ceremony. Hiyoshi's eye was still twitching in disbelief. Should we wake her up? So she knows she didn't just dream it? Naruto asked as he helped pick Hinata up off the floor. We probably should. Hiyoshi sighed and pulled out a bottle of smelling salts to bring his unusual daughter back to consciousness. To-san. I had a really wonderful dream that US said I was going to marry Naruto-kun. She fidgeted quietly as she said that. She then looked around and saw Naruto. It wasn't a doctor dream, and with that Hinata fainted again. In unison Hiyoshi, Haku, and Naruto all groaned. I simply hope she doesn't do this at the wedding. It would be a bit trifling if that happened. Hiyoshi commented as he once again used some smelling salts to bring his daughter back to consciousness. Needless to say, after 25 minutes, Hinata had gotten used to the shock. It was amazing that it was so shocking the Hinata had fainted at least 9 times. It wasn't really that shocking to the others, but to Hinata it must have been a big shock. Almost everyone knew she was infatuated with the hidden genius of the Hidden Leaf Village. As I was saying, in 2 weeks you Naruto Uzumaki shall wed my eldest daughter Hinata, of the Hyuga clan. Also be sure to wear something formal, such as your clan robes. No jumpsuits. Hiyoshi made it clear that he didn't want this to be some mockery of the Hyuga clan. He then noticed his daughter didn't faint this time and sighed with relief. Why 2 weeks? Naruto thought that was quite odd. Then at the back of his head the image of Ino came to view. Inoichi bargained with you, didn't he? Hiyoshi nodded softly. Never, challenge a doting father, so scary. This was the only thought that stuck in his head. He made it clear Ino shall have her wedding first. He made it quite clear, him and his wife, alright? I'll be sure to remember in 2 weeks. You can count on me to remember that. Naruto then gave his trademark pending foxy grin. Then dreadful thoughts filled his head. Formal wear. I don't own anything formal. And as I remember, guys usually have to dress formal for their wedding or their wife won't let them live it down. After that, though, his eye twitched. This wasn't good. Okay then, we shall leave. We will see you in 2 weeks. Hiyoshi stood and walked to the door. I will be waiting outside Hinata. This couldn't be. Was Hiyoshi actually trying to be a good father and make Hinata happy? WW will SSCUWW when we get married. A and P probably when you marry Ino. The Hyuga heiress managed to stutter out, as she fidgeted with her fingers looking off to the side. Okay, have a nice evening Hinata-chan. He then hugged her tightly. He was starting to see the point the arrow Sennin and the furball made about every man's dream. Then again he remembered that there would be arguing. He of course returned to attention hoping Hinata wouldn't faint. She had done this before when he hugged her. Thank you, Naruto-kun. I'll look forward to ORW wedding. The Hyuga heiress once again stammered. She then slipped out of Naruto's arms reluctantly of course and walked out the door. Naruto flopped onto the couch and sighed in an exhausted manner. No more affection for me today. Naruto closed his eyes and got comfortable. He sensed a shadow pass overhead and opened an eye to see Haku leaning over him with a delicate smile on her face. You don't get a say Naruto-kun. Zabuza-san is on a mission, which means you will spend the evening with me. Haku smiled kindly and helped Naruto up. This might be my only chance to spend some time with Naruto-kun. I need to show him that I am still fond of him. She then led Naruto to the dinner table, too tired. Naruto managed to mutter. Before he could mutter anymore, some food was shoved into his mouth. Delicious food. That was all it took to get Naruto to wake up. This was the power of Haku's cooking. Too tired for something I made just for you. Haku then gave a smirk since she knew Naruto loved her cooking. She set a large bowl of ramen in front of Naruto. This ramen was on par with Ichiraku ramen. That's just the appetizer, Naruto-kun. How much food did you cook for me? Naruto's stomach then growled, or should it be said that it roared. Hey, looks like I'm still hungry. He scratched his cheek, feeling a tad embarrassed by this roaring of his stomach. I know you ate light to make it easier on Temari. So I cooked you dinner figuring you must be hungry. She smiled as she reached into the oven and pulled out some egg rolls and wontons. Thanks for the recipe, Tenten. Too bad Temari doesn't know the best way is to cook for Naruto. Haku smiled as she thought quietly while checking the main course. She looked to see Naruto was happily eating the ramen. She then giggled when she saw there were Naruto Kamaboko fish cakes on one of his cheeks. What? Naruto had paused his inhaling of noodles when he heard Haku giggling. He was oblivious that there were some fish cakes of his namesake on his face. There is a kamaboko on your cheek, Naruto-kun, she managed to say between giggles. This, in all honesty, was what Haku admired about Naruto most, his childlike purity. She walked over and took a napkin and wiped his face and simply stared into his eyes. This was picturesque moment. Naruto, you really have changed my life. I know about so many things because of you. She then blushed deep crimson and backed up to return to her attention to the main course. She quickly set the wok on the table, then set a plate with wontons and egg rolls on it between the two of them and a bowl with fried rice on the table. An hour later, "'Cause I don't feel like going over the meal anymore." After having in fact devoured the large meal, the two had relegated themselves to sitting on the couch peacefully. The two were looking around trying to find some way to start conversation. It was like they had a moment for something and it was long gone now. Naruto for one was oddly quiet. Naruto then leaned over and kissed Haku's cheek. He smiled when he saw her face turn as red as a tomato. His smile then turned into a chuckle. You think that's funny, do you? Haku huffed as she jabbed Naruto with her elbow. The two had such trouble figuring out what to do since Zabuza was on a mission. It was a bit awkward without Zabuza being a strict authoritarian, and not allowing the two to be alone. One would think that Zabuza took the mission to make it possible for the two to get closer. Someone had to break the silence. He grinned in his special way. He began to tickle Haku as he broke into laughter. No, stop, that isn't funny, Naruto-kun. Haku cried out between giggle fits as she was being tickled. She squirmed and writhed trying to get away. Yes, it is. And it's ending the awkward silence between us, was his reply as he continued to tickle Haku. He then suddenly stopped tickling her and looked at her. He took in her beautiful face and blushed softly. You're beautiful, Haku-chan, he called softly as he looked deeply into her eyes. Arigato, Naruto-kun. She blushed softly. She gazed affectionately up at Naruto and smiled happily. She then wrapped her arms around Naruto's neck. She was blushing a bright crimson. She had never thought this situation would happen. Naruto slowly leaned closer and kissed her softly. His right hand rested softly on her cheek. His eyes slowly drifted closed as he kissed her affectionately. His other hand ran through her long dark hair. Naruto slowly broke away from the kiss and simply blushed. His thoughts were on what had just happened. He had kissed Haku, a girl he had been extremely fond of for 7 years. Did Zabuza count on this to happen? No, it couldn't be that simple. Naruto stood to his feet and helped Haku to her feet, and as she got to her feet she fell forward right into Naruto's chest. Haku simply blushed deep red as she rested her head against Naruto's chest. She had imagined a situation like this would happen someday, but not like this. Naruto-kun, I have a confession to make. Haku blushed deeply. She was about to make a bold leap forward. I'm in love with you. Her blush deepened after her admission. I love you too, Haku-chan. Naruto wrapped his arms around Haku slowly. He simply just held her close. It was a known fact that Naruto had a big heart. He was more than capable of having love for all these women that seemed to love him. Naruto sat down on the couch with Haku. After a few minutes he had noticed Haku had fallen asleep. Sleep well, my snow angel, he spoke softly so as not to wake her, and lightly placed a kiss on her forehead. He closed his eyes and rested his head lightly against hers as he too slipped into sleep. The next morning, at 7 a.m. there was a pounding at the door of the home. Naruto of course was a sound sleeper, so he didn't hear anything. Haku on the other hand did and woke from her serene slumber and walked to the door. She opened it up just a crack. She then opened the door when she saw it was Ino. "Good morning Ino, I trust you are here to see Naruto? MMHMM. Since my parents are planning the wedding we need to get Naruto some formal clothes and get invitations sent out. So we need to get started today." Ino smiled cheerfully. Many people had often compared the two noisy blondes as being perfect for each other, just based on their similar personalities. Only difference, Ino liked to eat healthier than her fiancé Naruto. "Naruto is sleeping but I know how to wake him up." Haku smiled sweetly as she went to the kitchen and heated up the broth for her ramen from the night before. She then returned with a bowl of ramen, and waited as Naruto slowly woke up. Figures he would wake up from the smell of that stuff. Ino had an exasperated look on her face as she watched Naruto wake up and begin eating the bowl of ramen. Once he was done, Ino took the bowl, handed it over to Haku, and dragged Naruto out of the apartment by the collar of his jumpsuit. Naruto quickly used Kage Bunshin no Jutsu to create one clone which ran over and kissed Haku on the cheek and hugged her tightly. Once Haku smiled happily, it disappeared into a poof of smoke. He was more than thankful that he learned that technique since it was going to come in handy from the point on. 5 minutes later at the Yamanaka's. "Okay. Naruto, you wait here with my dad while we pick out flowers for floral arrangements." Ino then disappeared into the back with her mother, leaving Naruto and Inoichi alone. The two men just blinked since it seemed pretty pointless. "Then why did you make us come here?" Both men shouted out in unison since it was rather weird. "Hey Naruto. I know you're good with Kage Bunshin no Jutsu." Inoichi began as he looked at his future son-in-law, and? Naruto replied as he looked at Inoichi with caution, since he knew they would end up getting in trouble if Ino or her mother found out what they were up to. "Could you create a few clones and get us some food and coffee? It's 7 in the morning, we need breakfast." Inoichi wasn't joking either as he and Naruto both yawned loudly. Naruto could only grin before creating 3 clones which then stealthily ran out the door. Within 15 minutes the clones returned with some cappuccinos and some pastries. "You're going to have your hands full with Ino. She's just like a princess Naruto, but I gather you know that already." "I am. She doesn't let me take her to Ichiraku ever. She says that Ayame-chan is too pretty for her to trust to be around me." Naruto simply sweat dropped when he finished that sentence. "It begins," Inoichi quipped, knowing all the signs from years of marriage. He knew all the signs and could give this boy some pointers. "You do know whenever a woman says that to reassure her that she's beautiful, right? Yet given your upcoming situation you will have to find ways to reassure each one that they are beautiful in individual ways." Naruto nodded his head in agreement. You could say that Ino was what they call the hot chick, beautiful, while Ayame was the girl next door, beautiful. "I do know that, but I swear if one more person tells me I'm living every man's dream I'm going to hurt them. Let me guess, Jiraiya-sama told you that." Inoichi's eyes rolled at the thought, then he figured it was typical thinking of the perverted Sanin. It was the typical thinking of the man who writes Icha Icha Paradise. Of course Inoichi's wife doesn't know that he reads that book. "So how long do you think it's going to take them to pick out flowers and choose arrangements?" Naruto asked nonchalantly as he looked around, making sure. He had an idea of flowers and bouquets to use if he made a wife angry. "They actually have a I'm sorry I confused your birthday with a different wife's bouquet." Naruto smirked, some knowing he might need that a few times. 3 hours later. "Okay, sorry it took so long. We get all the flowers picked out and just the right arrangements planned. Now we go find a place to have a wedding, get Naruto something formal because I am not going to marry you while you wear an orange jumpsuit. And then find caterers for the reception. No Ichiraku Naruto." Ino and her mother then dragged Naruto and Inoichi out of shop, making sure the door was locked as they left to find a place for the wedding to be held. 3 in the afternoon. "Tsunade-sama, we're here because you knew Naruto's father and may know a thing or two about the Uzumaki clan. And we can't find Jiraiya-sama." Ino started as she kept a tight hold on Naruto's arm. It had been a trying day. They finally found a place to have the wedding. They were now on the task of finding Naruto something formal to wear. "Well, Arashi's clan robes might not fit Naruto, so you will probably need to find someone to replicate them. Now let's see." Tsunade pulled out a kunai and threw it at the wall, causing Jiraiya to reveal himself. How do you keep finding me, you old hag? Jiraiya shook his fist in anger, mostly since the kunai hit the wall uncomfortable close to his groin. Let's go and make yourself useful and make Naruto some formal clothes with his clan seal on the back. Call me an old hag again and I will aim higher next time. Tsunade prepared another kunai as she watched Jiraiya cautiously. Fine, sheesh, come on brat. Jiraiya shouted as he dragged Naruto out of the office. This left Ino, alone with Tsunade, Shizune, and Sakura. Ino pig, you know I will make sure Naruto-kun marries me too. Sakura didn't miss a beat at trying to stir up trouble with her rival. I didn't know my fiancé liked girls with giant foreheads. Ino retorted as she stood to her feet and the two eternal rivals glared at each other. Their animosity for one another seemed to materialize as if while they were glaring it seemed as if lightning struck. I saw him first, piggy. Sakura responded as she cracked her knuckles. The two were about to throw down right there and right now. While you are fighting I'm going to go see Naruto-kun. Shizune calmly and cheerfully said as she walked past the two. She had a sly smirk across her face as she was headed for the door. Oh no you don't. The two grabbed hold of Shizune's shoulders and dragged her back. Tsunade's eye twitched as the three girls began to bicker right in front of her. She growled angrily and slammed her fist down on her desk much harder than before. This sent the desk flying down to the floor below. The desk landed on top of Guy's head and split in half. Amazing. Guy-sensei, your head is so well trained that nothing can harm you if it hits you on the head. I must also train to have as hard of a head as you. Rock Lee was quick to say as he looked at Guy with admiration. This is my Kekkei Genkai. Lee, head of iron. Guy then went into his good guy pose, his teeth sparkling as he posed. Is that so, Guy? I thought it was just that your skull is really thick. Besides you don't have a Kekkei Genkai, Kakashi quipped as he looked up from his book. This caused Guy's eye to twitch. Why must you be so hip, Kakashi? Guy thought as he became quite frazzled from Kakashi's sarcasm. The four women upstairs could only twitch in shock that Guy's head was so thick that nothing could hurt him if it hit him on the head. It was just so odd and unusual. After the shock was over, the three women were about to start arguing. Don't start again, Tsunade warned them as she cracked her knuckles. There were veins appearing in her forehead. Stop fighting over Naruto. Honestly, don't you girls think Naruto is well capable of loving all of you? He is after all someone that wants to be Hokage. And the Hokage must show care for the entire village as if they were his or her family. The three women nodded, never having seen the angry side of Tsunade. She regarded Naruto as a son, maybe even a grandson, that is if she wanted to admit she was in fact old. And she wasn't about to admit that. She felt like she was in her 30s, and thanks to a genjutsu she looked it. Now sit down and we can get to the subject at hand, planning the wedding. Elsewhere, Naruto stood in the local tailor shop. Jiraiya had managed to put Naruto into a replica of his own clothing. Naruto simply had a few blood veins popping out of his forehead. He was definitely not amused by this. Are you out of your mind, Ero Sennin? Ino will kill me. Naruto shouted loudly right into Jiraiya's ear, his eye twitching. Jiraiya stood and glared at Naruto. I'm doing you a favor. You should have clothes like this. It causes people to misjudge you. Jiraiya quickly replied, as he continued to glare at his student. I'm getting married, I'm not performing kabuki. Fine, sheesh. Still take this as a present. You are after all my best student. Well living. And one day you too shall have a student. Hopefully just as annoying as you were. Ya know I think I aged 50 years because of you. Jiraiya complained with his arms crossed over his chest. An hour later, this is much better. It's comfortable, won't make Ino shout at me, and on top of that it's orange and black. Naruto was pleased with the new clan robe, or in the case of what he would be using it for formal wear. There it is, the spitting image of Arashi. Except for the whisker marks. But what do you expect? My number one student is getting married. I'm just so proud of you. And you're marrying one heck of a beauty. Jiraiya was quick to give a dual thumbs up in approval. Naruto could only grin. He didn't care about correcting the Ero Sennin. You know I have to throw you a bachelor party now, boy. Jiraiya shouted quite loudly, not caring who heard, getting lecherous thoughts in his head. No strippers. Naruto didn't have the same lecherous thoughts that his sensei had. This of course caused Jiraiya to pout. Not even one stripper? Jiraiya tried to bargain with his moral student. He of course knew he was going to lose this argument. Not even one. I don't think I really need to worry about seeing naked women, Naruto quipped. He knew quite well at his current rate he was going to be seeing more nudity than most married men in the coming weeks. At the Hokage Tower. Tsunade-sama, we just need to find someone to perform the ceremony. Ino began as she tapped her chin in thought of who they could have perform the ceremony. Would you do it, Hokage-sama? No, that might not be such a good idea. I'm kind of unreliable in this considering I was once married to that lech Jiraiya. It might be bad luck for you too. Tsunade was by no chance joking about Jiraiya. It would explain why she hated him so much. Just then Kakashi had appeared in the room under a poof of smoke. Yo. His typical entrance was to be expected. No, you can't be the person who gives the ceremony. You're always late. Sakura quipped quickly. She may not have been exactly the best friend of Ino, especially when a guy was involved. Kakashi walked out of the office in defeat. Next to walk in was Guy. Next was quickly yelled and Guy walked right out while sulking. We may have to have Jiraiya be the head of ceremonies. Shizune calmly commented. At hearing this, Tsunade of course paled, thinking about the ceremony that Lech would give. I'll do it. Tsunade quickly called out. She would do anything to make sure this wedding wouldn't be a complete mockery. Later at Naruto's apartment, Naruto staggered into the apartment where he currently lived and fell onto the floor carrying some bags. Home, sweet home. He climbed back to his feet and went right to his room with the bags of new clothes. As soon as he walked into his room, he dropped the bags in shock. His day just got a whole lot more hectic. His eyes simply twitched, not once but thrice. Standing in his room was the one person he hadn't expected to run into this day. Hey fucktard, I was getting tired of waiting for you to get here. The person called out, full of anger, to Yuya, the most foul-mouthed ninja Naruto knew. She may be part of the leaf now, but still she has no sense of watching her mouth. Not to mention no tact. Why me? Why today? Why couldn't she wait till later to track me down? Was the only thought that crossed the number one surprising ninja's mind. You know, asshole, I'm really pissed off you haven't asked me out on a date yet. And don't give me that you're getting married bullshit. You can still date other girls. She quickly started to chew the blonde out, and blonde sighed since he just wanted to get some sleep. Fine. Let's go for drinks 2 nights from tomorrow. Naruto wasn't sure about dinner since to Yuya's mouth would get them kicked out of the restaurants. Bars didn't seem to mind as much, and Naruto was technically not under legal age to drink since in Konoha it started at age 16. The unofficial law was as soon as you could sit at the bar. Okay, see you there, shithead. She then pushed past him after punching him in the arm, not in a playful manner, but in a to Yuya manner, meaning hard. She likes to hurt the ones she loves, they say. Once he was sure she was out of the apartment, he flopped onto his bed and groaned. My life is going to be hell. Hopefully the sweet wives will counterbalance the bossy ones. And with that he sighed in discontent and snuggled into his bed. Naruto had finally gotten himself a good night of rest, as would be indicated by the fact it was now 10 in the morning, and he was hanging off the side of his bed. He then fell over the edge and hit the floor with a thud, muttering one word, ouch. He then crawled back up into his bed and stared at the ceiling for a moment. He then drifted his attention over to a wall. He then saw a large banner. Naruto, meet me at Ichiraku Ramen. Anko Mitarashi. Naruto sighed. Another date already, at least he was well rested. He staggered to his feet and got dressed, and staggered to the bathroom to brush his teeth. Upon walking into the bathroom his face turned bright red, for what he had seen when he was walking in was a nude Haku who was drying off after bathing. Oh crap, I'm sorry. He quickly turned and ran right into the wall behind him, knocking himself out. Naruto-kun. Haku pulled a robe on and knelt down beside Naruto. Naruto shortly came to and rubbed his head and winced some. Itai. He looked over and saw Haku looking at him rather concerned. He sat up and rubbed his head, wincing some more. I need to learn to knock. He looked away feeling a bit embarrassed. His face turned bright red at remembering what Haku looked like while she was nude. It's not like you weren't bound to see me like that, Naruto. Haku spoke softly as she put her arms around Naruto. She smiled softly as she kissed his cheek before heading to her room. Naruto just sat there blushing still, until slight fear washed over him. Anko, now that was a scary woman. Naruto sighed and went to the bathroom to brush his teeth. Then he rushed out the door, making sure to get to Ichiraku Ramen on time. He skidded to a stop as he reached Ichiraku Ramen. He looked left, he looked right, he even looked up and below. Then out of nowhere someone snuck up and wrapped their arms around him. "Naruto-kun, you're late. You are lucky I'm forgiving today. So if you buy me some dango I will forgive you for being late for our date." And with that, Anko began to drag Naruto off by the collar of his shirt. Ayame watched this from the ramen stand and giggled. Moments later the two were outside of a place that sold the sweet dumplings that Anko loved oh so very much. It was often compared to Naruto's obsession with ramen. Naruto simply blinked when he saw all the skewers she had thrown into a tree. Of course it was rather embarrassing since she made a picture of them kissing. "Why did you do that with the skewers?" Naruto's eye twitched some since it was such an odd thing for Anko to do. Not once had Anko been the sweet romantic type. In truth she was more of a creepy examiner. "Ah, is Naruto-kun embarrassed? How about I give you a kiss to get your mind off of it?" Anko smirked in a sadistic manner as she pulled Naruto close. This helped Naruto realize that this was in fact the same Anko. Naruto quickly was able to use Kawarimi no Jutsu to replace himself with a Naruto plushie. He had seen his fair share of odd things, but this side of Anko was just scary. Anko blinked as she kissed the plushie and looked up to see Naruto trying to make an escape. "Oh no you don't," she called out as she bound Naruto in many snakes. She walked over, looked at Naruto with an unamused look on her face. "Now Naruto-kun, if you keep running away I'm going to have to take more drastic measures." The tone she used would make even Orochimaru's skin crawl if he were still alive, that is. "Fine, you win." Naruto didn't like the tone that Anko used since it was beyond creepy. Creepy meant you had an idea of what they would do. Beyond meant you had no idea whatsoever. "Good. Now come on fox boy. Let's get some lunch." Anko was quick to glare at Naruto before he could mention that she just ate several dango. He only paled and let her drag him to the barbecue restaurant. Apparently there had been a rumor that Naruto and Ayame were fond of each other, and Anko needed reassurance that Naruto's attention would be on her elsewhere. "Move it, Shikamaru, hurry up," Ino yelled out as she stood in the center of the location for the wedding. She had managed to get mostly everyone she could to help set up the wedding. "Oh man, what a drag, how did she manage to talk me into this?" Shikamaru without missing a beat began to complain. He had been stuck with the task of bringing in the flowers. "Ino, this isn't what Akamaru is meant for. He isn't some chair delivery dog." Kiba chimed in as he walked beside his giant dog who was carrying numerous chairs on his back. Just then Ino turned. Her eyes seemed to have changed to something demonic as they were aglow with a red darkness. Ino was going bridezilla on all of them. "This is going to be my special day. The day I become Mrs. Naruto Uzumaki. Now you stop complaining or we will have a problem. Do we have an understanding?" After she finished, Kiba and Shikamaru just paled and shrunk away in fear. "Got it, boss lady," the two managed to squeak out before returning to their assigned tasks. Hinata giggled watching this scene. It was funny to see Ino act so crazy about her wedding. "Ino, we simply must get you fitted for your wedding gown." Suddenly came a surprising voice to everyone. It was Sai. Oddly enough, no one ever expected him to be so, well, gay. Naruto did, but that was only because Sai had made comments about Naruto's penis way too much for normal comfort levels. "Ooh, Hinata-chan, we should totally get started on adjustments of your mother's wedding gown while we're at it." And when Ino, Hinata, and Sai, the best dressmaker in Konoha, had left, the decoration crew sighed, just before shuddering at the creepiness of Sai. "Remember, if Ino isn't happy, no one is happy. So let's finish this setting up." "Oh man, what a drag, I don't get how she convinced my wife that I should help." Shikamaru quickly complained as he left to bring some more flowers in. Back on Naruto's date, Naruto was growing more comfortable with this new calmer Anko. It was still strange. It was like Choji eating a salad strange. And Naruto had seen Choji eat a salad before. "You've sure grown up, Naruto-kun. You're not that same mouthy brat I met at the Chunin exams. Which is good because you would be unattractive then. But still loosen up. This is a date, not a wake." She then patted him on the shoulder to reassure him that it's okay to be himself. 'Cause she wouldn't bite, at least not that much. Anko was a special kind of lady, or as Jiraiya put it, she's a special kind of girl. The kind you don't bring home to mama. She's a super freak, super freak, super freaky. Of course Naruto had that song stuck in his head for a week after. Okay Anko-chan. Naruto was slightly nervous, of course one would have to be considering how unusual Anko was. Of course they weren't so different because Naruto wasn't exactly normal. Good, now eat up. You must be hungry, Anko said with a cheerful look on her face. Naruto began to eat. He was after all quite hungry after having not eaten yet that day. After they had eaten and paid for their meal, the two were talking down the streets. Naruto was of course telling stories that portrayed him in a heroic light. These stories of course earned the fox boy a smile from the examiner. Oh stop Naruto-kun, you're telling me Jiraiya-sama screamed like a little girl when girls found out he was peeping on them? Anko couldn't suppress her giggles when she thought about Jiraiya screaming in such a manner. It's true. Naruto grinned in that special way which must be genetic because his father smiled in the same exact way. Naruto put his arm around Anko's shoulder, feeling more comfortable around her now that he realized she wasn't going to kidnap him and torture him. Anko blushed bright red when she felt him put an arm around her. She was one of the many who had seen him change from a loud-mouthed idiot into being one of the best ninja in the village, and like many of the women, she was smitten with him. It had been noticed by many that Anko had become a completely different woman since Orochimaru had died. Still, she was the same scary lady who used snake jutsu, thrown skewers from her dango into trees to make a picture, and overall someone who was extremely hostile when provoked. Hello Tucci. May I say you look most youthful today? And your daughter has the flames of youth burning in her as well. Though it looks like her face is a strange shade of red. Guy stated boldly as he struck the good guy pose yet again. That's because my daughter is lovesick. Tucci replied as worked on making sure the broth for ramen was just right. Is that so? Who is she smitten with? Guy's teeth suddenly gleamed with light shining brightly. Who else? Our number one customer, Naruto. Tucci laughed softly, which became louder when he saw Ayame blush bright red from embarrassment. Tou-san. Ayame screamed out, feeling even more embarrassed since she hadn't even told Naruto yet, and her father had figured it out. Tucci and Guy laughed loudly, since it was as they felt it adorable to behold. Ayame of course was simply embarrassed. She wanted to tell Naruto but it was hard to tell him. And back with Naruto and Anko. I have to go Naruto, I haven't thanked you properly for ridding us of Orochimaru. She then pushed Naruto against a wall and kissed him deeply. Naruto simply closed his eyes while blushing faintly. It was a bit shocking at first, but Naruto found he liked it. Naruto had pulled her close, returning the kiss. After a few minutes Anko broke the kiss and blushed. We'll have to go on another date Naruto-kun. And thank you for getting rid of Orochimaru for me, and for the village. She then backed away from him still blushing, before leaping off to go where she needed to be. I sure seem to attract the unusual ones, eh hey. But Anko is really pretty if you think about it. Naruto thought quietly with a faint blush on his face. Naruto just blushed before walking to eat Chiraku ramen. He was still a bit hungry, he just needed one bowl to make him full. He sat down at his usual seat, having passed Guy-sensei as he reached the stand. I'll have the Hokage in training special ramen, Naruto sighs. This ramen meal was a combination of all meats in a miso broth, and the Naruto size portion was a size they had just for Naruto. Coming right up, and because this is your billionth bowl of ramen, you get a special prize. Tucci smiled at Naruto as he began to prepare Naruto's ramen for him. Naruto smiled at the mention of special prize. He liked prizes cause they were always good. Cool, what do I win? Naruto grinned as he shifted his attention to Ayame, who he saw was blushing again. You get to marry Ayame. Tucci proudly proclaimed, at which Naruto and Ayame had shocked, yet blushing faces. Naruto then fell backwards off the stool which he had been sitting on. Naruto-kun, was all Ayame could say as she ran around to help Naruto up. As luck would have it, Tucci pulled out a camera and took a picture of this, smiling happily. After Naruto and Ayame had collected their composure, they looked at Tucci like he had gone mad. At the rate you two were going, there was no way you two would get together. And I am quite serious. Tucci calmly stated before setting out 2 bowls of ramen at the stand. Now consider this your first date, he said before laughing heartily, enjoying this change. Naruto and Ayame sat at the stand not quite understanding, but they both figured they should just go with it. San, you're not just doing this for publicity just because Naruto-kun is going to be the next Hokage, are you? Ayame was quick to ask before starting to eat her ramen. Naruto was already eating his ramen. It was delicious beyond compare in his mind, though it would be a far cry from the truth if he said he only ate here because of the food. Anyone could tell he came to see Ayame, just Naruto and Ayame were a bit slow to tell each other how they felt. Heck, it's the reason why Ino tried to keep Naruto away. Of course Ino thought every girl was prettier than she was. No, of course not, I'm doing this because you two are cute together, and don't you dare think I haven't noticed. He chuckled in a fatherly manner as he watched Ayame and Naruto on their date. It was probably the happiest he had seen Ayame, if you didn't count her reaction when Naruto came back 3 years ago. Meanwhile at the Hokage Tower. I see, so the Raikage sent you here as per the arrangement for peace. You will meet Naruto tomorrow and the wedding ceremony shall take place in about 3 weeks. Tsunade was calm and relaxed, the things she had to do just to maintain peace between Kumo and Konoha. She couldn't believe who the Raikage had sent for the political marriage. She had heard Jiraiya's reports on this one. Yugito ni another container of a demon. Tsunade knew that Yugito was just like Naruto. Why is that, Hokage-sama? Shouldn't the political marriage take precedence? Yugito was quick to ask, feeling she was being delayed by some plot. True, but Naruto has 2 weddings already. One to Ino Yamanaka, another to the Hyuga heiress. So had we known you would be arriving today, we would have arranged for such. Tsunade was being as honest as she could. She knew that the Raikage had sent this girl here to assassinate Naruto. Send a demon to kill a demon. But neither were demons, just containers. Fine, where will I be staying then? The female container asked with the most calmness she could muster. This Anbu squad will take you to your temporary housing? Tsunade motioned as 10 Anbu ninja entered the room and quickly left with the Cloud Ninja. Tsunade knew that Naruto would be able to handle Yugito. Naruto would probably reason with her and get her to see the light, like he had in the past. The kid wasn't likely to die until he becomes Hokage, and even after that it wasn't likely he would die then. And back with Naruto. Naruto had finished his meal of ramen, and was now telling her another of his stories that couldn't have possibly happened, except maybe in a parallel world where nothing makes much sense. Of course it was all quite true, because the story was about Jiraiya being beaten to a pulp by some girls at a hot spring. And that's when Ero Sennin screams like a little girl. After Naruto said this, Ayame giggled. Of course Jiraiya was standing behind them and there were tears running down his face. Naruto, I thought we had an agreement. You weren't supposed to tell anyone about that. I thought we were friends, huh? Jiraiya was a bit irritated that his student was telling that story to almost every girlfriend he had now. No, Ero Sennin, the agreement was I wouldn't tell anyone that you still love. Naruto was cut off by Jiraiya clamping a hand down over Naruto's mouth. Jiraiya was nervously laughing, because he didn't want that to slip out ever. Now, I don't think anyone needs to be hearing that, mostly because it's private. Jiraiya's eye twitched heavily. This wasn't something he wanted anyone to know, especially the person he was reportedly accused of being in love with still. Naruto, you really shouldn't intentionally embarrass Jiraiya. Ayame managed to say before giggling again. Jiraiya sighed and stopped covering Naruto's mouth. He wouldn't be able to live that one down ever. So say I accidentally let it out, then it's okay? Naruto asked sheepishly. Jiraiya's eye twitched. He didn't like the sound of that. He liked living without embarrassment. Why'd I suddenly feel like there is impending doom? He craned his head around to see behind something, with pink hair, green eyes, a red dress and cracking its knuckles. Sakura Haruno, Tsunade's apprentice, and little to Naruto's knowledge someone he was. Little to Naruto's knowledge someone he was supposed to be on a date with tonight. Naruto, you are supposed to be on a date with me right now, not with the girl who feeds you ramen. Jiraiya was supposed to inform you of that. Naruto was then sent to the ground with a punch to the top of the head. Ouch. Naruto screamed out. He then stood up and glared at Jiraiya, who was laughing in enjoyment. You're supposed to tell me stuff like this. Before Naruto could hit Jiraiya over the head, he was dragged away by the strongest kunoichi in Konohagakure. There goes your fiancé Ayame. Hope you're ready to fight for his attention. Jiraiya calmly said with the infamous smirk of Jiraiya on his face. Ayame just rolled her eyes. She didn't need to fight for Naruto. She could get his attention with ramen. She knew the secret recipe of the Ichiraku ramen. Back with Ino and the decorating committee. Ino returned and was about to go bridezilla on her reluctant decorating crew. Shikamaru, Choji, and Kiba were cowering in fear of Ino. The most brutal bride-to-be was becoming more hostile. "Oh man, where is Naruto when we need someone to take the heat off?" Smack. Ino hit Shikamaru right over the head before he could complain anymore. "Any more complaining and you will be charged with the task of fetching Naruto from Forehead Girl." Ino quickly threatened the three men, who quickly gulped and nodded frantically. That was an impossible task, and all who were charged with the task would be brutally beaten to a pulp. "We'll be good," they quickly replied in unison, in fear of Ino, whom they dubbed the bride from hell. And back with Naruto. "Sakura-chan, was it really necessary to hit me over the head?" Naruto rubbed his head, feeling a lump that was forming from the force of the punch. He didn't quite know why Sakura suddenly showed an interest in him, but he wasn't going to complain. "To make a point, never be late to our dates from now on, or else I will put chakra behind the punches." With that said, the pink-haired Kunoichi then flicked Naruto's forehead with a gentle smile. Naruto couldn't help but smile at her before eating some of the food Sakura had brought for them to eat. Fried chicken, strawberries, tea, and she brought some ramen just for Naruto. "I brought foods you would like, greasy, sweet, ramen, tea, and of course me. Not hitting me." It had been this fact about Sakura that caused Naruto to end up with Ino. Simply put, Ino didn't try to knock his teeth down his throat for an honest mistake. It was easier to get results by yelling at him and forcing him to go shopping with her. "Yes, as long as you conduct yourself like an adult," she calmly threatened. Naruto just nodded his head, since he didn't quite like the idea of being hit again. "Okay, then let's eat." Shortly after they had started eating, the impossible happened. Naruto was full. Never had this been recorded. He always had room for more, but he ate most of the food by himself. But the unimportance of food had given them time to talk finally. A thing they hadn't done since they were younger. Somehow in the 3 years they simply just grew apart, and Ino became more dominant in Naruto's life. "Naruto, did you know Jiraiya-sama and Tsunade-sama were married?" Sakura looked to Naruto, who she was latched to. Naruto nodded softly. He had known for a while. He was told it was a secret. "Yeah, I know. Dunno why they ended up divorced, but I think it has to do with him being a pervert." Naruto chimed in quietly. He then looked to Sakura quietly, as he remembered exactly why he had a crush on her when he was younger. "You know, I always found your forehead to be one of your best defined features. It's what makes you, you." Naruto smiled softly and kissed her on the forehead. Sakura blushed in a way that her cheeks for the moment matched her hair, and then things started clicking. She realized back when they had just become a teen, it was really Naruto disguised as Sasuke saying those sweet things to her. This caused her to blush even more. "Naruto, why is it you ended up with Ino Pig? You just quit showing interest in me one day." "Why?" Sakura asked calmly as she regained her composure. She never quite understood why her biggest fan just completely gave up on her. "Too many mixed signals, and you always hit me, and Ino never did anything like that." Naruto didn't have any other reasons for why, other than the obvious. He thought Ino was pretty, and he appreciated the kindness she had shown him after he returned from training with Jiraiya. "Oh, I guess I learned a lot from Tsunade, but still I was a bit stupid. I let you get away." The pink-haired Kunoichi looked down slightly. Sakura jumped slightly when she felt herself being pulled into a gentle embrace. Her face turned the most interesting shade of pink, much like the flower for which she is named. "You know, you have another chance, Sakura-chan." Naruto gave Sakura his most genuine smile. He just simply stared deep into her eyes. Sakura blushed again when her gaze met his. In that moment she began to understand how Hinata felt when she was around Naruto. Sakura nodded and rested her head on Naruto's shoulder. She relaxed slowly and just nestled close to him. She smiled serenely. "Thank you, Naruto-kun," she quietly said as she snuggled close. She had never thought she would have gotten a second chance with Naruto, but thanks to this old law she had a chance to be with Naruto again. "Naruto, if you become like Jiraiya I will have to hurt you. No divorce for you. You will suffer if you're a pervert." Sakura somehow managed to slip in one threat. One last threat. "No problem there, you can trust me." Naruto would sooner die than be like the Arrow Sennin. He had no shame whatsoever. Naruto could just see Jiraiya proudly proclaiming that he was a super pervert. Naruto smiled and stroked Sakura's head softly as he held her close. You don't have to worry about me being like him. He calmly reassured her with a genuine smile. And then as the sun slowly set in the horizon, the two shared a soft and tender kiss, enjoying a moment of true happiness. As nature has it, the most perfect moments are always ruined. Just then a huge sunset backdrop appeared out of nowhere. And the two most embarrassing ninja in Konoha stood giving a good guy pose. Who else but Lee and Guy? They always did this for no reason. Oddly enough, the third person there was Tenten, who was growling and clenching her fists. Smack, crack. Can't you two be serious for a moment without it turning into a drama? Tenten fumed for a moment. Now stop following me. And stop the speeches about springtime of youth, it's getting embarrassing, you two. Tenten huffed angrily before putting on a cheerful face. Naruto and Sakura just stared at this scene. Naruto wasn't so much shocked considering the recent events in his life that made no sense. So the sweet Tenten suddenly bashing her former teammate and former sensei over the head wasn't so shocking. Naruto-kun. Tenten quickly ran over, standing at a distance, her eyes sparkling lightly. Naruto of course became more nervous since he knew what was coming up. I would like for you to come over to my apartment tomorrow evening for dinner. There it was. Naruto eyed Sakura cautiously, afraid that another catfight would erupt. Tenten, couldn't you wait until my date with Naruto-kun was over? Numerous veins popped out of Sakura's forehead. Naruto quickly nodded to answer Tenten's question. And that's when it happened. The weapon mistress and the chakra mistress began to argue. I don't see any reason why I can't. You don't own Naruto. Tenten hastily replied, and Naruto's eye twitched. Naruto. You are now my eternal rival. I am jealous of your luck with women. I too hope to have as much youthfulness as you. Before Lee could continue, he was struck across the head by the two arguing women. Shut up, Lee. The two women shouted out as they momentarily stopped their arguing. Naruto was being pulled back and forth between the two like he were a rag doll. Naruto envied the unconscious Lee at this moment, because he knew this argument would continue into the wee hours of the next morning. Another day, another insane situation. Dad, did you go through this too? Naruto managed to mutter as the two kunoichi continued to jerk him back and forth. Thanks for watching, guys.